Hello, everyone. My name is Ria, and I'm going to be the facilitator for this meeting. First, I need a motion to call the meeting to order. Miss, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be great at pronouncing your names, but Miss Kaplan and Miss Dreilinger. Okay. Thank you. So we always officially start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I need a motion to review the minutes for approval from our October 23rd meeting. Okay, so Miss Bedgood and Miss Gonzalez Parker. I hope I didn't mess that up. Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is reports from all of our subcommittees. So can we start with the communication subcommittee first?
Okay, I think that's going to be me. So the last subcommittee meeting was last week, and we started the meeting with 3 of the 4 subcommittees meeting together. That was research, communications, and community engagement. And we spent maybe the first 30 minutes of our time together reviewing the climate and culture survey from our parents. So I'll just hit the highlights of what the communications committee reflected on. And I'm sure some of the other committees will have some similar things, but here were our initial thoughts, or some of them anyway, in the climate survey. Many of these thoughts are questions. One was, are there actionable insights in the data that we should be sharing with our families through communications? Another one was, should we be looking at responses from specific groups, such as students with disabilities or parents of students with disabilities, or the families who report experiencing things like anti-Semitism? We noted that bullying was a topic that raised a lot of concern in the survey. Another question, are there ways we can better equip teachers to prevent bullying by establishing and supporting positive, equitable learning environments? Then we also noted that the lowest satisfaction results were at the middle school and the high school. And this is around bullying, and are the efforts to address bullying more effective with our younger students, which led us into a conversation about ideas for improving climate and culture. The Positivity Project, which is in place in our elementary and middle schools, was noted, and it's working well at the elementary level, less so with the older students. We did learn about students working to achieve greatness, or SWAG, at the middle school. And then we were starting to brainstorm, are there other approaches that buildings can use to catch students, quote unquote, being good? And then are there ways we can encourage parents to speak with their children about bullying, to report, to not be a bystander, to not be a bully? And then the last thing, we kind of reflected on our first meeting where we were talking about the committee trying to put together a regular newsletter to families. And this time we talked that will be a bit of a challenge to create and sustain a newsletter over time. And could we use existing communication channels to share information around our DEI work? For example, and we actually did this past Friday, to include information about bullying in one of the usual Friday updates that we do every other Friday. And so we actually did a little segment on bullying in Friday's communication. And then lastly, are there other topics from the survey we could do something similar with, where we embed it in communication that's already going out, so it's just part of what we do. Happy to take any questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is the community engagement subcommittee.
Yes, so I'll be conducting the report out tonight for the Community Engagement Subcommittee. We also had a very similar discussion related to the bullying concerns that really jumped out, as a result of the surveys. And one of the major factors is, parents are filling out the form and parents are hearing it from their children, but are not at the school to fully see and or confirm a lot of the ongoings. There was a mention of a farms where if there was a youth counselor who actually came in and conducted an activity to combat bullying, which was a lot more effective than just presenting slideshows. So the hands-on activity really resonated with the students because it was an actual demonstration. Um, and it didn't go over anyone's head. It was more beneficial. And so looking, for ways to really incorporate that into the schools moving forward might be something to consider. Also, there was an acknowledgement at the high school that, there were beginning of the year assemblies, students joined clubs, there were resources for students at the building related to building bullying and so forth. But it's less hands-on, which can be beneficial for some, but then ineffective for others. Um, there's also an acknowledgement around the bullying issue that there's a hesitancy to report the issues. So we know that this is, especially for our students, this can be a very, um, trying age where the worry is more about the loss of friends and or the loss of reputation. They're trying to build trust with their peers and trying to fit in. So people tend to either not be fully aware of and or minimize the problems because of fear of loss of relationships. So the bullying that we are hearing about could potentially be not the full picture and or there may be a lot more bullying than we know of that we don't know of just because of the fear of actually reporting. All of these topics led to a consideration of potential community event topics, including lack of communication to parents. Um, and there was an acknowledgement that there needs to be, an establishment and or a maintenance of trust, between parents and school, because we do all know that these are very trying times and schools are no longer safe. And so having that constant communication, keeping that trust or that line of trust while our children are at the school, so that we know that they're safe and we can trust sending them to school without worrying, well, as much as we possibly can control it. Um, and then there was also an acknowledgement that some students, because of some of the school policies around bullying, they're afraid of standing up for themselves because they know there'll be repercussions for actually defending themselves. If both students are involved, there's repercussions for the student that was protecting themselves. So there's that mixed messaging on what that means and how that's carried out. And I think that's very important to acknowledge, especially for our younger children who may not understand they're being put in these environments for the very first time. They may not understand what it means to stand up to a bully and or protect themselves from harm. So, yes, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Next, we have like the research subcommittee.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can I, this is Mr. Mosley. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Walter, go ahead.
So it seems like if I didn't know we're a sponsored group by a school district, I would have thought you were talking about like a prison or something. Is it have we gotten so far from COVID that this is no longer just a post-COVID type of phenomenon, or is this something that is kind of still pervasive and still relatable to post-COVID? Like, I don't, I don't get it. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but, and I know yes, Sunday was like the International Day of Tolerance, and I was at an event where young people were talking about bullying. But I knew, but that report really scares me because it seems like we're talking about like institutionalized correctional facility.
Oh, I'm sorry, Walter, were you speaking about the community engagement report out?
The bullying portion, the bullying report.
Yeah, I think we're all referring to this to survey results, and maybe Derek and or Marie can give a little more context into that. But we're talking about the survey results, and I'm really just acknowledging what stood out to us during that review of the survey results. And so it was, became a really robust conversation about bullying. We know that it comes in all different shapes and forms, not just in person, but also through social media. And all kinds of ways that we could either control or not control. And so looking at other ways to mitigate, acknowledge that on behalf of the parents as well as the students, and finding ways to mitigate and or even just to start to have that, not to start, but to have that discussion on ways that we're addressing, bullying in the ways that we can control it. But I'll turn it over to Derek and Marie to elaborate.
Well, I'll jump in, but Tamiko, that was great. Just a brief reminder, last spring we did a climate and culture survey. So we've been starting in the summer and through the fall, we've been in various committees looking at the survey results, and we've taken up the results that we got from our families. The survey covered many, many topics, inclusivity, quality of learning, the extent to which families feel like we celebrate different cultures, so on. There's several categories. I don't have them all in front of me. But at the last subcommittee meeting, we simply went through the data, and the survey results were done in terms of favorability. And we got very low scores, or relatively low scores, from our families with concerns about the extent to which we are struggling with bullying in the school, which is why you're hearing so much about bullying right now, because that was the thing that jumped out, is do we need to do some more work around that area? Derek, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Only that, yeah, it's a portion of what was discussed. I think that bullying becomes a major issue developmentally because students are still developing, and being part of a group, especially in elementary and middle school, is very important, and fitting in. And when students don't feel they fit in, or when students feel othered or feel different, they take it to heart, and there's a tension. And when parents deal with those situations, they're protective of their kids, and naturally should be. So I think that issue is perennial in these environments. I don't know if it has much to do with COVID so much. It is a developmental issue, especially at those stages, but one that has come to light as something we want to pay attention to. And the schools do have programs that address those things. They mentioned the Positivity Project. They mentioned assemblies and trainers and things that people have come in. But there's still a perception out there that bullying is a problem, and we need to be aware of those perceptions.
Walter, does that help? I'm not sure maybe you want to expand what you mean by a correctional facility, because that is certainly not our goal at all.
No. What I meant was that just from the report, is that's the type of behavior and culture you see fester in that type of correctional environment. I'm trying to survive. There's unwritten rules. I'm not going to speak to authorities. I'm not going to snitch. I'm trying to fit in. I'm trying not to stand out, and I don't want to let down my peers, regardless if I'm doing something that's even to my own personal detriment. And I don't know. It makes I'm a bit perplexed as to the findings in these reports, and I don't know. It was more of a commentary than anything else, but that was the one thing that came to my mind when I was listening to the report.
Yeah.
Well, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, I just think the intensity level is not to that degree. I don't think. I've worked in both areas.
No, I never said it.
I didn't say you're saying
I'm just
saying that, but
but
developmentally, when we see it, when people experience that in correctional institutions, we're looking at a lot of arrested development and immature behavior coming from adults. When adults express those types of things. In junior high, that's quite natural to see people wanting to fit in and dealing with in-group and out-group, and it's part of their development and their emotional maturity. And in elementary school. So I guess it's contextualizing it. Happening within an elementary school context or a middle school context. Some of these behaviors are to be expected. They're developmental, and teachers are aware of them and do address them in various ways. But I think, in a correctional facility, you see those same behaviors, and those are things experienced by adults that are developmentally inappropriate and definitely inherently problematic. Their context really does matter in these situations. But it's interesting to draw those parallels because they're institutions where people are dealing with groups and group behavior and how we manage that.
Go ahead, Kim.
Thank you. I think, and Walter, I could be completely off on this, but just kind of listening to your concerns, it sounds, at least the way I feel about hearing all of this is it's essentially like conditioning our students right now. They're being conditioned right now to know that if you say something, then you have repercussions. Like I think all of us who have students in the buildings, I have my third child in high school right now, and we've heard it before where it's like, well, no, we don't want to say anything because then they're going to retaliate against us, or it's going to be a problem. And I think the concern right now is how to flip this around, how to help the kids to where they don't feel like they have to stay quiet, because we're preparing our kids to go on after high school, and we don't want them as adults already preconditioned to feel like they have to keep their mouth shut throughout life. So I could see, like when Walter was saying, where the just the institutionalized feel of it. That's all.
And I have a child in the school. I had a child in the district. I have a child that was in the district that left because every day, and I thought he was joking at first. He would say, hey, how was school today? Oh, there was a fight. And it was like every day. I mean, literally, I'm not even joking. And I'm like saying, wait a minute, are you kidding? I mean, are you being flippant? And he would just say, no, there was a fight here, there was a fight there. And I'm like saying, whoa, you went to school in New York City and in Bergen County, New Jersey, and you never had this type of experience. And, we moved here because of what we thought was what we still think is a good school district. But when I went to just talk about it to officials, it was like, well, ever since COVID, kids have, had a lot of pent up emotional, misdirected emotional behavioral attitudes. That's why I kind of mentioned the COVID thing, because I said, are we still kind of experiencing that, or is it something that is unique to this particular district? I'm sure it's not, but that's all I really wanted to kind of say. And I apologize. I haven't been here the past couple of months because I've just been traveling a lot. But I just wanted to just kind of put my small 2 cents in as it relates to that report.
Nina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I won't try. I'm trying to take too much time, but yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, Walter. And I think just to respond to a couple of points you just mentioned in our last, when you last spoke, no, it's not just here. What you're speaking to is definitely not okay, and it's also something that is happening across the board, as far as I know, as a teacher. It's not just here. I don't think it's just COVID. I kind of feel like I've said this so many times, so people are probably going to know what I'm going to say, but I think a lot of it is cell phones and social media. I think that students, typically, let's be honest, when we were their age, we tried to fit in, we tried to dress a certain way, and there was the fear of getting ostracized. That's nothing new. But it's like a million times worse now. And it's because of cell phones. It's because of social media. It's because their ability to connect with each other is so much faster. And it's a world that we are not intervening in the way we are able to. And bullying is definitely a problem. Again, it's not just Guilderland, but it's a problem. And I think that by being the adults, I think I commend the district for wanting to address it. I think that we need to look and see what we can do as adults to try to address it. I think it starts with communicating. It starts with learning how, let's look at the country, right? We're pretty polarized. Look at the examples adults are setting for kids, right? So we need to come together in spite of our differences and learn how to connect and learn that, the country learning how to function as one and respecting each other and listening to each other instead of making it into conflict. That's really what's happening. So I hear you.
Go ahead, Anise, and then we should probably switch over to our research committee.
Yeah, actually, and I'm reporting from the research committee, so I'm happy to segue right into our report. I also wanted to just, especially on the last couple of points that you made, Walter, I think that it's an interesting observation, and one that I've also recognized, and Nina, I think that you spoke to it too, that though we've all, we all experienced this at this time in our development too, when we were in high school and we were in middle school, and just like as humans developing and wanting to fit in, and in an institution, this is like, these are the experiences, these are the things that you come across. But there, you brought up the point of COVID being kind of a lens that initially when we were seeing maybe an increase in bullying being a concern, that was kind of the first answer. And COVID, I think, we'll probably find in long-term research, definitely that experience, and students that were in 5th and 6th and 7th grade during that time and are now, they were separated. So the social aspect of school that we all experienced, being together during that time, they developed differently. Like they were not with each other, and then they came back together, and there was a reliance on electronics that like doesn't end. We can't just say, okay, we're back in person now, let's change how we communicate with each other, let's change how we've used electronics the last 3 years. So it's a new world, and these things, I think these are all compounded, and I think that survey, I think we are seeing like the results, a cumulative look at what we all say and see, and it's real. You know, it really is, just like Nina said, like 10,000 times worse than when we experienced it, for all of these compounded reasons. And you know, we're just, you know, we're all trying to work together to address it. As a parent, I feel the same way, but also recognize that, you know, I've been in districts and I work on the other side of, you know, trying to do the community connection with the schools, and I see it in all the ways. So it's happening everywhere, and I think your observation is correct, and I think we're all scared, or not even scared, but really, you know, it's not just COVID. It didn't end when COVID ended. This is our new reality that we're dealing with our students and our children.
Thank you. Thank you for your input.
Thank you for bringing that up. I can go into our summary of kind of our discussion in the research committee. A lot of what everybody else has said, we also, you know, discussed, and so I'll just kind of hit the points that are kind of action items that we came out with. We also saw the overarching theme of bullying being something that really stood out to us and to the parents, and then in our discussion, the students. So we talked about, like, really focus on what we can do, what can we be tasked with in the research committee to use this data, this information. And so we talked about, you know, we can ask, so we think we initially we need more data. Like, we definitely need to see the teacher and student surveys to find similarities across and differences, and that would give us a lot of information on you know, where there might be kind of misinformation that parents are getting, that students are getting, you know, having different experiences, or information not quite reaching parents. And we specifically said that, like, the student survey, we definitely want to, you know, if we get one or the other, we want to see that one first. We'd like to kind of see any correlations in that data. And then to see more detailed data relating to, like, the common themes that we see throughout. So I think it was the article perspective would give us more kind of a narrative, you know, more detail of people's responses. So that was an action point that we left with. Derek was going to work on getting us the article perspective. So we have a little bit more information to analyze the data. And then we also talked about the fact that a large number of parents didn't respond at all, and just considering, you know, it's important to, the data that we have is, you know, comprehensive, so it's really important to focus on that, but also to consider what it means that so many parents didn't respond, and what that could be telling us, and you know, in their engagement, but also in, like, how we're, you know, is there a demographic that we're just not reaching, and is there a better way to reach and get input from them, which also led us to think about really research. The research committee can, you know, support the other subcommittees in their goals, and, you know, thinking about that, of how are we reaching the community, it immediately made us think of the community engagement committee. Is this a goal that they have? And should we, you know, this is where we can work together to support their goal, from analyzing the data that we all received in the survey, but we can be tasked with doing that analytical work to support the other groups' goals as, like, the action groups. And that was pretty much a summary, I think, of what we covered in our meeting.
Thank you. Next we have, like, the student voice subcommittee. So can I just, like, give a brief summary of that? Or okay. So our basic goal for this year was to generally involve more students and incorporate, like, all of their perspectives and voices in our committee's activities after evaluating what we did last year. So to achieve this, we kind of decided to hold monthly meetings with students from both the middle school and the high school. allowing to like gather more perspectives beyond just like those of like Shrey and me as students within the subcommittee. So the middle school meeting took place last week, and the high school meeting took place this morning, and I was part of it. So basically, we kind of shared ideas about improving the school environment and promoting kindness and fostering empathy. And this meeting kind of just served as like an introductory session to like help everyone get acquainted and start discussing potential issues within our school. Like one of the main questions we targeted was, what is the change you'd like to be and see? And a lot of different people gave like different opinions about what they think should be different within our school. Some people talked about the school environment. Some people talked about how people talk to each other and empathy. Some people gave feedback on how to improve it as well. And so that's basically the thing that we wanted to do. And I think Mr. Westbrook or Ms. Werther can add stuff if I left anything out.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of summarizing all of that, because there was a lot of very thoughtful feedback from the students, very specific initiatives that we can really move ahead on. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So I took a lot of pages of notes from them, and they have their finger on the pulse of what the feeling is like in the school. And they talked about dealing with difference in people, language and make fun. They're aware of the issues and they want to be able to have an impact on them, which I thought was really cool. So the students were, just very insightful and very helpful, both at the middle school and at the high school.
A question?
Go ahead.
Was there any slight distinction between the middle school and the high school in terms of how they saw or what they presented or offered as ways to improve culture?
Yes. I think the interesting thing about the junior high students is that they focused on the teaching and learning process and their relationship with teachers. I think at that stage of the game, they still are focused on learning and believe that their teachers can lead the way to addressing some of these problems. So they focused in on the teacher-student relationship a lot more strongly. I think at the high school, while they did mention teacher-student relationships and how they can facilitate and foster student relationships, they tended to take more agency and talk about things that they could do to make a change in the school. And they focused a lot more on the student community and how they interact with each other and how they treat each other, and wanting to change some of that climate in the school.
Do we have any other comments or concerns about anything that was said? Like anything anyone wants to add? Okay. So now I think we can like transition into the DEI and action segment of the agenda.
Thanks so much. It's been a busy month for myself and Derek. So we've attended a couple of different things. I attended a feminist club meeting at the high school, and really excited that we're going to have a special speaker coming in January. So we're kind of trying to get that happening for that club. So we're just kind of planning some things out like that. Derek and we joined Mike Laster at the middle school as he and the FMS equity team discussed the climate survey results at a CI session. The two of us also presented some PD for K-5 TAs at Pine Bush Elementary School, not just for Pine Bush, but for any of the TAs in the elementary level, and also for aid monitors during the superintendent's conference day. And there was a lot of great conversation and insight that we received from those individuals who do such an amazing job with our students and our staff. And I think that, we always want to make sure that we recognize them. We also attended an equity officers meeting at BOCES, and Derek, myself, along with Tish Barnett from Niskayuna and Alan Gadsden from Bethlehem, we facilitated the first it's a long name, Capital Region Global Majority Educators Affinity Group, a space for BIPOC folks in education. It's not exclusive of folks, so anyone's invited to join. But we had our first affinity group meeting at BOCES, had some really great turnout from teachers and educators, TAs. I think there was also a bus driver, so people from all around, anyone kind of in the school community, different roles coming together and having conversation. So our next session will be in January, and then we'll have 2 others. It's still open, so for anyone who knows of individuals who might want to join, that's something that people in education can participate in. Let's see, there was an Muslim Student Association meeting, an Alliance meeting that were attended. We joined Altamont Elementary School for their equity team meeting, and they're kind of coming together and creating these like school quilts with all the students putting their names on a bulletin board, and it's a really great project that they're doing. Derek and I, we actually co-taught one of Jody Cahill's math lessons very recently. And so, and Jody unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but we were in her classroom, and, we met with the student voice for both the Farnsworth and also the high school. And I also joined the equity team meeting, with Pine Bush as well. So, and today we actually met with Beth Martinez, one of the members of our group here, from Educate to Empower, which they have some really great programs that they're kind of coming into schools. And so I think, Derek, please fill in with some others. I'm sure that there's other things I forgot to mention.
Me and the mute button were wrestling, but essentially the only thing I have to add is that we completed a newsletter that will be going out to faculty and staff, and we're looking forward to finally getting that out and getting some feedback. It's interactive, so we want people to give us feedback along the way as well, about how they're creating inclusive classrooms in their schools and what they're doing to do that. And we want to amplify those voices and spotlight some of those practices and make sure that we're sharing best practices throughout our schools. Another thing that we'll relate to that we just saw today when we were walking around the high school is that we're finally getting furniture in our DEI space in the high school, and it was all sitting outside. It's being put together, so we're excited about finally being able to decorate that space and get in there and use it as a base of operations to be able to connect with students and to extend our reach in the school. So that's DEI in action for us. Are there any questions? Oh, I did forget to mention that we will be attending I will be attending a student forum tomorrow in the high school. This student forums were implemented by Mike Piscatelli, the high school principal, and that was his way of being able to open communication lines with students and receive feedback. And I've been attending those. And interestingly enough, he did one of the things the students said in the earlier forum this year was that one of the things they saw this year is a difference in the amount of altercations in the school, that there were a lot less going on. So students did notice that there has been a change in tenor, that the staffs have been trying to address some of the issues that they are facing, and they got the results as well from the survey, and they're trying to make the changes in real time as we're trying to make them over time. So I'm looking forward to going to the forum tomorrow to see what else we're uncovering in that regard.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions about the DI in action segment? Okay, I think we can move on to the learning component. I think that's Mr. Westbrook again.
Oh, yes. So as we move along, I hope each of you had the opportunity to look at the videos. There are 2 short videos. I want to share one of them. It's called The Power of Positive School Culture. And when you're watching that video, I want to just get your overall impressions of what you see and the role that culture plays within a school. Because we took last year to do a culture and climate survey. And as we're looking at those results and we're beginning to dial in, I want us to start developing our lens in terms of why is school culture important? Why does it matter? And what does climate have to do with it? So this was a way of trying to illuminate that discussion and help us all share our thoughts and dial in. So let me see if I can share my screen. There we are. And I'll get it started.
What do you think of when you think of an extraordinary high school? Top-notch academics? Definitely. Lots of interesting electives? Sure. But there's something else that's equally essential, harder to spot, and not as common as it should be. Schools need to be places where kids feel positive and safe. Places where every student feels they belong. Schools with positive culture have strong policies that address bullying, inclusion, and diversity. But policies aren't enough. The best test of a school's culture is to talk to the students.
The community, it's very diverse. You have different cultures and different types of traditions and stuff, but altogether it's a nice community because people here are respectful and, you know, they're very nice to each other.
You also want to see how they act. Students look happy and at home. They're comfortable voicing their ideas.
Find more than one people, like all the migrants together, is more powerful than just one person making a change.
In a school with a positive culture, you see the celebration and acceptance of all kinds of students. Whether an academic enthusiast, an athlete, an artist, whatever culture, gender, or personality, there's an acceptance and appreciation of everyone.
Okay. I am lousy at this. Okay. In terms of promoting a positive school culture, what stuck out to you in that video about the role of culture? Miss Werther, Leah.
For me, it's always student voice and hearing during, like, if you want to know, ask them. And I think that sometimes, you know, people forget to just like ask them directly, because they have something to say, and we need to sometimes, you know, we need to do a better job of making sure that we listen, or, you know, when we listen, to really hear them and make sure that they know that, you know, that we want to hear from them. And it's not just, you know, a box that we're checking, like, we got to talk to them. Like, no, we really, really want to know what you have to say.
Excellent. Thank you. Tamika.
Sorry about that. I was fighting with my mute button as well. Um, the visual observation of there was no distance between them in the video. If you noticed, each classroom was set up like a community, not like a classroom style. They were shaking hands, they were high-fiving, they were dancing bachata. It was a lot of physical, there was a lot of physical, I would say, observations for me. And then even their conversations, they were in groups and there was a lot of engagement going on. And so I think that right there fosters a sense of trust, comfort, safety, right? When you think about physical distance and you think about standing alone, you're not safe. You don't feel safe. You kind of feel, for most people. But when you kind of embed that sense of comfort within a classroom or within an environment, that's where the culture starts to shift, and that's where the acceptance starts to shift. I'm a Latina, and so all we do is hug and high five and kiss, and so for us that's a sense of safety and acceptance and love, and so that was my observation. So
excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shaka. Uh-oh, did we lose her? Did we lose Shaka?
Nope, my mute button wasn't working either.
Oh, okay.
Having a whole conversation over here. But anyway, what I was saying was, Tamika, I'm so glad you said that, because I really hadn't really paid attention to like the closeness of everyone. I was thinking about, before you started talking, I was thinking about, in my mind, the fact that they were talking about, Derek, kind of what you were saying earlier, about the high school, the self work that they have to do and the collective power, right? And Leah, what you're talking about, like, student voice, and that it's their responsibility and the adults around to make the school safe for the kids and have, help build upon that culture. And that was the representation of that, right, Tamika? Now it comes full circle for me because they definitely looked very comfortable and safe, so that was my thought.
Excellent. Anyone else? Okay. One of the slides they said was that school culture influences how kids learn. And that's the role of culture is very fundamental to the learning process. Blanca.
Sorry, my little hand was not working. I was just going to add that my observation, which is that it was similar to my schooling experience in Peru, and also similar to some cultural nuances that I found here in the United States when my own children attended Montessori school. It's hard to articulate, but that sense of community and the balance between individual work, but being part of a community and enmeshed in it, it's something that really stands out to me. I think it would be interesting to see if there is a lower incidence of bullying, for example, in Montessori schools in New York State versus public.
That's an interesting point. And it relates to directly to the video, because it was looking at positive school culture and what are the impacts of positive school culture. It says there are lower rates of substance abuse, lower rates of suspension, lower rates of bullying, lower rates of absenteeism. Those are things that are evidence of a positive school culture. And we can see that, the things that we struggle with that may be connected to culture, why we're looking at and studying these issues. And we know that a positive school culture also promotes higher academic achievement and a sense of psychological well-being. So we're chasing that notion that we need to know what we need to do to create a more positive school culture, understanding that we've had changing demographics in this district over the last 10 years. We've introduced more diversity into our district. And when you introduce diversity, but if you don't manage it well, it can lead to more conflict instead of less, and makes things more complex. So adjusting to that is why we need more to create more inclusive environments that foster a positive cultural environment. And that's why that's one of the reasons we're focusing in on this. Nina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to echo what Blanca said, I think, and Derek also, to what your point was just now, and that's that to create a community is to find commonality, right? And where people have things in common is where community comes from. So when you feel like you can identify with others, that's when people naturally, like from an anthropological standpoint, when you have connections, it's like, remember how we talked about that, I think in past DEI connections, about when I can see how you're similar to me. And if I can see that you're similar to me in one way, then we're in the same tribe kind of thing. It's like a tribal thing. So I think the way that you can create that in a school district that's so diverse and has so many students in it is through the circle group training, because I've done that in large group setting. And every time you do circle training, it has to start with an activator, and the activator gets you to move, first of all, because we're humans and we have to be moving. But also it forces you to find connections with the other people in the group. And once you can form those connections, then you are able to then truly do the work that circles can do. So, if we do try to move forward and address the bullying issues, which I suggest we do in the schools, I do think that the key to that is to first help students to find, how we're similar through our differences, because we are. And that's really what I was saying earlier too, which is that we're so polarized, but we're not. And how do we help the students to see that they're not so different, right? That we are when it comes down to, we have the same fears and the same wants, and we can connect in certain ways. And that's how I think those small examples of the community-based learning is successful, but it can transfer into a larger setting. You have to find those connections.
I agree, and thank you. There's a lot to be said for creating a space where we can be open-minded and inclusive. I often say that we have to acknowledge all three things similarly, that we're all, there are things that we all share in common. We're like all people, we're like some people, and we're like nobody. And we have to be able to embrace it all, our common humanity, and gain a tolerance and acceptance and open-mindedness to the differences of our social identities, and still be able to maintain our individuality. And for some reason, it's difficult for us to hold all three things at the same time. Usually people want to be all the same, or they don't want to acknowledge difference. And finding that balance is something that we're charged to do, is to help create inclusive environments where we can open minds that are closed and get them thinking about ways to see themselves as a we, even amongst their difference. And I love that challenge. And that's why culture becomes a good variable that we can manipulate as a group to really influence the school. But how we do that is a matter of culture and climate, understanding those concepts so that we can start to dial in. And that's why I wanted to share the second video, and then we can get your insights into the distinction that the person is making between culture and climate. And I'm going to share, again, this is a 2-minute and 37-second video, so we won't be taking up a whole lot of time.
In the middle of the diagram, we see respect and value. That is the core of everything as it relates to your climate and culture. What is it that you respect and value? Now, we may say that we respect and value certain things, but you may act out differently. So when you identify what you respect and value, that's the most important thing. Now, the next part of this is, that you see in the diagram, is a blue line. That blue line is climate. Now, what is climate? Climate is the emotional feeling that you have when you enter a space. Now, I've been in a lot of schools all over the country, and I've been in some schools, you walk in the door and you can feel it right away. You don't have to meet a person at all. You walk in like, oh, this doesn't feel good at all. Ooh, what's going on around here? Anybody ever walk into a building like that? Oh my goodness, yes. And then you walk into some other buildings, you walk in, you're like, oh my goodness, this place is Disney. It feels so good in here. The climate, the feeling, it's you can see in there in the diagram, it moves up and down because it fluctuates. That's what climate is, and that's why it fluctuates. Sometimes it's close to what you respect and value, and sometimes it's not. So let's talk about culture. Culture is represented by the 2 gray lines. And for me, culture is nothing more than a fancy word for traditions. What do you traditionally do? How do you traditionally operate and behave in a building? And that's why it's represented by the 2 gray lines, because there's 2 different types of culture. There is operational culture, and then there's your behavioral culture. Now let's talk about the operational culture. Operational culture is how you operate. How do you traditionally operate? How do kids come in the building? How do kids move through the hallways? How do teachers get scheduled? How do students get scheduled? How do we have an assembly? How do we do lunch? Then the top gray line is your behavioral culture. How do people traditionally behave? Better yet, what is tolerated? How do students talk to students? How do teachers talk to students? How do students talk to teachers? How do administrators talk to students? How do administrators talk to teachers? So now we have all of our pieces in this diagram. A lot of times what we try to do is we try to improve the climate in a building. We want the environment to feel better. But I'm letting you know, you can't just sit there and say we're going to improve the climate. What you can do is you can improve the culture. When you take your culture, your operational culture and your behavioral culture, and align it with what you respect and value, those 2 lines move a little closer. And when those 2 lines, your behavioral culture and your operational culture, move closer to what you respect and value, what happens to the climate? It levels out.
Okay. So what stuck out to you in this video about the distinctions that were made between climate and culture? This one was a little bit more academic than the previous one, but yes, Anise.
I mean, I agree, and I think it'll be interesting when we see all of the results of the survey to kind of compare. I think that students' perspective, talks about their experience, and it talks about, I think, operational and behavioral. We can see kind of the difference in what their experience is being in class and what the teachers feel they're doing, or what the teachers' response is. I think that just overall, I think it's helpful and gives some insight when we are reviewing the data to compare those 2 specifically, those 2 aspects of the culture and behavior, excuse me. And see, what is their correlation and where can we see, okay, well, clearly they're very far apart, or maybe they're closer together. You know what I mean? We can use that insight in our review.
Definitely. Tamika.
Yeah, I mean, what he was stating is really common sense to me. When you look at the difference between operational versus behavioral, you think about a robot, right? Robot for operations, policy, procedure. It's just an automation mode. But when there's no human factor to that, to kind of condition or to add in that behavioral value, things kind of just all over the place, right? There's no in between. There's no respect. There's no leveling out. There's no comfort. There's no anything. It's kind of like the difference between a manager and a leader, right? When you think about leaders, a leader actually brings the culture into the space. Everybody's accepting. Everybody's like, wow, this person is great because they're actually leading us forward, right? And so that's kind of parallel to that behavioral concept. And students or our youth react to that. They react to people. They react to human nature. They react to the realness of it all, right? Not policies and procedures and keeping them still and you must do this and you must do that. They're not robots. They're children. They're actual human beings. And so when you embed that culture, and like the last video showed us that actual community, and start to build that culture, that realness of it all, because we are real at the end of the day. We don't thrive off of policies and procedures. We need them, but we don't thrive off of them. That's not how we function. And so when you put the realness into it, that behavioral, that cultural value, and you start to develop that culture, it starts to come together. So yeah, it was just common sense theory for me. So thanks for showing us.
Definitely. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, because I'm on the phone.
No problem. You light up regardless. So I can tell when you're about to say something. So go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I appreciate the comments and the actual video. The one thing I will always kind of wonder is when we're talking, I think you alluded to the fact that we've become far more integrated over the past decade or so in the school district, but it's still a very compartmentalized and disproportionately compartmentalized, environment. So to me, I think it'll be great to see when these values are brought together, and we see maybe there's a disproportionality of maybe certain segments of the population not valuing other segments of the population who might be in a quote unquote minority. Are people from that majority segment, will they be just as willing to, take further steps towards those who might be numerically in the minority portion of the segment, but yet disproportionately have had their values and their feelings and their emotions and their history and their attributions towards culture and life and so forth and so on, whether it's here in New York State or elsewhere, or whether or not they're willing to move that much closer to them. So that's what I will be interested in seeing when all this is said and done.
Definitely. And these are some tools that are here for us to use. And I want to make sure that we, if you had to explain the difference between climate and culture to people, how, based on, that video, how would you explain the difference?
In my own words?
This is to anybody, not just you. I'm not putting I'm putting everybody on the spot, but yeah, how would we explain climate and culture, or how are you understanding climate and culture based on that? Oh, Shaka.
Blanca had her hand up first. Oh, she put it down.
Oh, yeah. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and go. I was just thinking of one is what you say and the other one is what you actually do, right? So we can say that, we want to build a school that's inclusive and everybody's welcome and, but then when something happens or, as soon as one group is feeling like they're not heard or they're not part of the decision making or not part of the school culture, then it doesn't work, right? So it's kind of, I took that video to mean like the lines are coming closer together when you start walking what you're talking, right? And it will align then. It's what you say and what you do. If you say that's what you want, then your behavior then needs to match that. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Blanca.
Kim can go first. It's okay.
Okay, Kim.
Okay. I just wanted to say what caught me with the video were the values and respect, because we talk about respect a lot, like just in general. I mean, at home, it's like you need to respect your parents, you need to respect your teachers, but we don't really, and I'm not saying us as a district, but people don't really talk about values. And they don't really sit down and think, okay, first of all, what are values and what are my values? Like I was asked about a year ago what my values were, and it just threw me for a loop because I'm like, I've never actually sat down, and I took it very seriously, but we never really discuss values. And I think once we hit that piece as well, that's going to might make this a little bit easier for us, just because people will see that, okay, we're different, but we have the same values. We share this. And that's also where the respect comes in. That's what helps the climate of the school. But it's just the values part really grabbed at me, because it's like, we don't really, that's something, and it's not because it's not important. It's just something that I think you don't really think about. It's kind of like, it exists, but you don't really think about it. But I think just determining what your values are, or what like the values of the school community or things like that, that would be very helpful.
I agree. Excellent. Blanca.
So to this point, I was also similar, but I kept thinking in my mind that sometimes I know this that I'm on the school board. I did not know this when I was the parent of a child being bullied. I really feel like nothing is like folks not walking the walk, so to speak. No efforts are being made. And now that I'm on the school board, I see that we have a barrier at times because we are not able to disclose what we've done due to privacy concerns. So, law. So literally, look at face value, like we're not doing anything. Like the concerns are falling on deaf ears. When what any of us want, and I'm sure Kim included, and we are doing something about it, and we are unable. So that's a barrier, and it's particularly frustrating.
Oh, I agree. Those things come up largely because there are some trust issues. That those are things you talk about, the things we respect and value. I think you hit the nail on the head. Confidentiality, privacy, and transparency work well when we trust each other, and they don't work well when we don't trust each other. In the mode of trying to understand the difference between culture and climate, I always liken it to let's say everyone in this call, we're in the same room, and I have a hold of the thermostat, which is the culture, and I dial it into a certain temperature. The climate, if I take the climate of the room, I'm asking people about the perceptions of the temperature in the room. Let's say I have it at 74 and I'm toasty and I'm great. And Emma says, well, I'm a little hot and you need to turn it down. People's perceptions of the temperature are giving me the climate, their attitudes and their perceptions about what they're experiencing in the space. And that's what climate is. When we do a climate survey, we're trying to measure what are the attitudes and perceptions of people of the culture itself. So that's how climate works. But wouldn't it be wonderful? I'm the one in control of the climate, right? Of the temperature. So I'm turning it up and down. But if we all had our own thermostat, we could all dial in to where we're comfortable. And having a cultural system in place allows people to find ways to accommodate all the different perceptions and attitudes that are in the room. What the problem is if there's not a strong culture at the school, people are left to their own sense of self about what they're going to do. So I'm going to rely on my own thoughts, my own instincts, because what we respect and value isn't made explicit. We don't have a strong operational culture. We don't have a strong behavioral culture. Because those things aren't as strong as they need to be, I'm not feeling any warmth. I'm not feeling connected to anything. And so a weak culture or not a strong culture can leave people to sort of figure things out on their own and rely on each other. And it can be destructive. So building a strong culture is, we use climate studies essentially to make explicit what is beneath the surface. Culture is so there, the temperature, that we don't really think about it. Although we're all feeling it, we don't really think about it until somebody says, hey, I don't feel this way. So the climate study is our way of getting an eye, making explicit what's happening in the culture that's implicit. You can't adjust the culture unless people are aware of how people are reacting to it. So climate studies are important for us to start dialing into what's important in the culture so that we can start to make some adjustments or changes. Tamika, you had your hand up. So.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent an excellent description of the what a climate study is and the climate and culture relevance. And someone had said earlier, something about respecting parents, respecting teachers. But one of the things that will ultimately change the culture of the school districts is learning how to respect the students first and foremost, right? And so it's so one size fits all in many of the classrooms and the rules and the regulations and the policies, but it's not. It's never going to change the culture if it's one size fits all, right? So what works for some students may not be acceptable for another. What provides safety for one type of student is not going to provide safety for another. Another one may feel threatened by it. And so learning to respect the individuals that are coming into the school, getting to the core of their values, their understanding, and starting there to kind of help them adjust to and or shift the entire culture through that collective understanding. It's not just at the parental level or the teacher level. It is a collective understanding of those values, that level of respect, because our children are our future. And if we're trying to, I hate the word mold, right? I love the individuality of our children and who, they're learning to be, not just from us as, it's not just from educators, but from their grandparents, from their peers, from their parents. That's what needs to be respected and understood. And then you start to change the culture as well. So
can I chime in on this point?
Sure.
Yes. Because I understand, I get what is being said, but oftentimes, even when we leave adults to their own devices, and maybe this is really the issue, when we leave adults to their own devices, unfortunately, and as someone so noted, we live in a very, very partisan, divided nation. How do you get beyond what that child is learning in the home that we as parents and as community stakeholders would be in direct opposition to it? And how do you get beyond that in an effort to shape your culture? For example, we're at open houses for my daughter going, from middle school, and we got down to 2 schools, and one school on the website said they were very explicit when it came to their stance against LGBT community. And we sat down with our daughter and said, hey, our stance as a family and our support for your brother, Sebastian, and this is not a school that we support. And you know why? And we explained it to her, and she already understood. But again, that position that we have as a family might not be respected by a lot of people who who are in these schools, in these particularly this public school, in these public schools within the district. So how do you get beyond that? Because everybody can say there's a climate issue, but oftentimes we don't want to acknowledge who created the climate issue in the first place. Someone created it. It didn't come up through osmosis. It was created by human beings and their behaviors. So how do we get beyond that?
I believe it's the same way that ultimately we've always been trying to. Like, we're all American citizens, yet people at different places in history have all tell people, we want you to live up to the ideals that you state. Like, the beauty of institutions that we have is that they have missions and values and goals that they can be held accountable to, that they made explicit. And in our district, to bring it a little closer to home, we have values and goals and a mission that is made with our students in mind, centered in that discussion. And we have to encourage people to hold themselves to that, to be accountable to that. Now, what's on our website is ideal. Maria has been doing some work. She even mentioned it in the chat. She says, I think this work is about recognizing the needs of each and every student rather than saying all students, because she wants to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that it's okay to be different, and we can still be a we and still acknowledge that difference. Now, in saying that, that's our idealized culture. The things that we respect and value are ideal, and our actual culture may not be reflective of those ideals. And our job is to realize that tension, to bring it to conscious awareness. That's what climate studies are supposed to do in some way, shape, or form, is to bring some of that to conscious awareness so that we can begin to penetrate and say, okay, what interventions, what things can we do that are going to shift what we're doing in our culture, in our schools. And that's going to take a partnership between teachers, administrators, parents, and students working together. And I think that's the challenge that lies before us, is being able to say, okay, these are the things that we're seeing bubble to the surface, been there, frustrating a lot of segments of our population. I think it was insightful. Some people who do climate studies focus on one group at the exclusion of the others. We took the stance that we wanted to hear from all segments of the community, because we see that to dial in, people are having very different perceptions and attitudes and realities. Parents see things one way, students see things another, teachers see things one way, administrators may see it a different way. And now we got to do the work of bringing that together. And I think that we're feeling the weight of that by looking at the data and saying, wow, there's a lot of data to wade through, and trying to decide, okay, how can we start turning the tide by what can we focus in on that is shared across the groups that we can really help parents with, or help teachers with, or help students with. And so we have our subcommittees, we have these things in place, this mechanism in place. We've tried to revamp them in a way this year in order to try to dial in a little better with the data that we have. But that's the challenge, is to be able to say, okay, we took a picture of the climate. How do we adjust our system? What should we be doing? What more information do we need to start making the incremental changes to move the dial on this? So when we take the next climate study, that we feel like we're getting better at it. Oh, I thought somebody had said something. Sorry.
No, I said I appreciate the crystallization. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we got. I think, but everyone brings an honesty to this discussion. Is that it's uncomfortable conversations that sometimes our values, how we actualize our values, may be different, and we need to have those discussions and be tolerant. And sometimes, or say, you know what, certain things are not reflective of who we are as a community. We need to be more explicit. And I think making our culture more explicit forces us to deal with those questions, and helps us dial in a little better, because we need to. And I think everyone thinks, for the sake of our students, because the students are asking for it. The Student Voice Committee, they're like, well, if the adults aren't going to do it, if they're overwhelmed, don't worry. We want to see what we can do. Just create a space for us to do it. We want to try to take our swings as well. So everybody is concerned, and I want us just to be aware of the importance of this, of what we're doing in terms of the assessing climate, why it's important, and why culture matters. Creating a positive culture in our schools. It's going to address issues of absenteeism. It's going to address issues of bullying. It's going to start. So how we do that is a matter of how we can leverage our committees to actually create some deliverables that we think will have an impact. And that's the wonderful challenge that I think we're up to as a group. One last thing I'll say, if there's no other hands, I should be looking at hands right now. Tamika.
Just one final comment, I promise. The fact that we're all here collectively on this committee, it's, through appointments and invitations, there's students on this committee, means that we are 10 steps ahead from where we were a few years ago, right? We're having these conversations, we're sending out surveys, we're doing the collective work. We don't have to turn away. We're not in a position where we're turning away any type of student, right? We are 10 steps ahead in this world. And I think that is an important acknowledgement for this committee. So I just want to say that, this is extremely important, but also an acknowledgement.
Definitely. Emma.
I think it's also important to know, like in the beginning of our DEI committee, we share out about what the schools are doing. Like teachers in our school, I can only speak for myself and the school that I'm in, but we're working very hard to make active efforts to improve these things. So there's this committee, there's the schools that we're sharing about are also doing things. Like we're all really trying. And I feel like if we just keep doing what we're doing and keep making those foots and trying our best, that's the best that we can do, but we're doing something. I think that's so important. As a district, we're doing something and we're trying our best and we're working together to hopefully solve a problem that's really hard to solve, but hopefully one day will be solved.
Definitely. I agree. And I think centering our work, as Marie had alluded to before, on focusing on each and every student and what their needs may be, and considering that as a value, and looking at our mission and looking at what it says, starts to dial us in on the values, but it's the norms that we set. It's our expectations of each other, how we are, the expectations of behavior towards each other, that we need to, that's the ground where we need to meet and come to a place where we can hold each other accountable and make that aspect of our culture more explicit. I've encouraged the students in the Student Voice meetings to do that. I've encouraged our building equity groups to do that, and I've encouraged teachers and ourselves to figure out what is it that we expect from one another, and what can we hold each other to, so that we feel that we're seen, valued, and heard in these spaces. I mean, that's how we started out our year. And we always have to keep that in mind, is how are we creating welcoming and inclusive spaces for people to be able to share their perspectives and to be able to have honest conversations, and know that sometimes we're going to disagree, and that we can hopefully agree to disagree as long as it's not harming or hurting any segment of our population in any way. So that's the charge. And that's why we've, like I think Tamika just alluded to, this is these are the steps that we've taken forward collectively that each of you has seen and contributed to push us in this direction, to evolve these, our committee, our district level committee, our subcommittees, to move in a direction that actually makes change in our community. So I applaud you, especially those who are looking to become more active on our committees. We need that energy to be sustained throughout the year so that we can sit at the end of this year and say that we delivered on these things for our students, and be able to look back at our work and say, okay, we're moving the needle, we're moving the dial, and I'll be proud of the work that we've done. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share or say with regard to the school climate survey? Anything we missed in the video or something that we need to be aware of? Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time and attention to the learning module. I wanted to make sure we walked away from here with an understanding of climate and culture, at least at on some level, and to just see the gravity of the work that we're doing. Culture does not, it's very static, but it's very dynamic as well. And we are the dynamic piece of this puzzle. The actions that we take, if they're collective and rooted in our values and beliefs, can really make significant change in a short amount of time. And I think we're seeing that at different places, but we need to amplify that feeling in our schools and at home with our parents, and help develop that trust that needs to be there, so that we can work together and actually not be in the ideal phase of developing culture, but actually be really shaping our actual culture to meet that, holding each other accountable and being okay with doing that, engaging in that process. So thank you for your time and attention. I'll turn it back over to Ria to close us out.
Thank you. It was like great hearing everyone's perspectives and viewpoints. So if no one has like any other questions or concerns, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting for tonight. Thank you, Ms. Bedgood and Ms. Gonzalez-Parker. Thank you. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
And great job, Ria.
Thank you, Ria.
Thank you.